Well, good evening, Cedar Falls. Welcome to our regular council meeting for Monday, May 15th, 2023. I'll now call this meeting to order with a roll call from Madam Clerk.
Schultz.
Here.
DeBoer.
Here.
Cruz.
Here.
Harding.
Here.
Gamfield.
Here.
Sires.
Here.
Dunn.
Here.
All members present, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And if you can please join me, if willing and able, for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Our first item tonight is approval of minutes, or is there a motion to approve regular meeting of May 1st?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that does pass. Madam Clerk, do we have any agenda revisions tonight?
I have no agenda revisions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Looking at the order for tonight, we're starting about a half hour later than we normally would. I would ask if council would object to me pulling item 11, which is approving boards and commissions members. We have two members of the public here who the council has just requested to be able to thank and to interview if they desire. So we don't have pre-interviews or committee interviews. Would any council member object to me bringing those two members forward so we can thank them and send them on their way? Okay, so with that, that's item 11, approving the following recommendations of the mayor relative to the appointment of members to boards and commissions. A, Dr. Vicki Edelnut for the Board of Trustees, or Library Board of Trustees. B is Alan Stallnecker of Planning and Zoning Commission, and Sloan Albert Haskey is also Planning and Zoning Commission. So is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. And for those two members, if you would, if we have both tonight, if you'd like to come forward to the dais. Yes, we have one. All right, excellent. So Ms. Sloan Albert Haskey is up for appointment to the Planning and Zoning Commission for a term ending November 1st, 2027. Thank you so much for joining us tonight at the council. And does council have any questions for her? Okay, excellent. Then thank you so much for being willing to serve. We use the process of having a selection panel go through all candidates, and you came highly recommended from that board, and we're very happy to have you join if the council approves the Planning and Zoning Commission. So anything else? Okay, so it's been, any questions, comments from the public? Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. You are appointed.
Thank you.
Congratulations, and thanks again for serving the city.
Thank you.
Okay, back into our... And you're going to stay after all, huh? That's dedication. Okay, so moving on, I have no special presentations tonight. So moving to public forum, speakers will have one opportunity to speak for up to 5 minutes on topics relevant to city business. Does anyone from the public wish to speak on a topic tonight? Yes, please. Name and address for the record, please, sir.
Good evening. Andrew Schroll, 930 Newman Avenue. I'm speaking today on behalf of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee because we're in the middle of May Bike Month. Bike Month is a time for both kids and adults to think about biking for fun and to get around. It's a time to celebrate our trail system here in Cedar Falls. Bike to Work Week started today, so with the excellent weather this week, I encourage you to consider biking to work or to run an errand. If you're more of a veteran out there, showing others some tips to get started can be helpful encouragement. It's also time to think about the rules of the road when biking and for drivers to be alert for more bikers and walkers, especially at intersections. Like with motorcycles and mopeds, staying on the lookout can save a life. And out on the road, it can really make a biker's day when drivers are courteous when passing and slowing down and giving lots of room. On the other hand, driving too close to cyclists is dangerous. Unfortunately, it still too often happens that drivers collide with riders with fatal consequences. So to remember those killed and injured, the Ride of Silence is this Wednesday, May 17th, from Overman Park, and registration for that starts there at 6 p.m. Back on a positive note, there's a poster contest happening now for kindergarten through sixth graders on why riding a bicycle is important and what it means to them. They can create a poster on just an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper and turn it into Hall Bicycle or Bike Tech by May 27th. So let's keep each other safe and have a great rest of Bike Month.
Thank you, Mr. Scholl. Does anyone else wish to speak in public forum tonight? Hello, gentlemen. Just provide your organization is fine.
I'm Kane Shimp, 2024 West 8th Street. I'm a senior at Cedar Falls High School, like these gentlemen here. We work through a program called CAPS. What it is we go to a location on Main Street as well as over on UNI's campus at the JPEG Center. We learn real-life skills, business skills. We work with professionals. Right now, we're working with a project through the CFEDC, Jim Brown, Mark Nook. What we've been doing is conducting a survey to bring to students on Mocker Union. We've asked about 110 students how they feel about the Hill as well as Cedar Falls. We've got our data organized into 3 graphs, and we wanted to present that to you today, and that's what Cy's going to talk about.
Hi, I'm Cy Anderson. So we passed this out to you guys, and if you flip to that second page there, these are some of the questions that we asked. So our first question we asked the students, what were your top 3 things about Cedar Falls? And our most popular answer was they liked the small town feel. And then right below that, we asked a question about housing, and the most popular answer was that they liked the proximity of the housing. And then if you flip over the next page there, we asked, why not the Hill? And this was our way of asking, why didn't you choose one of the places on the Hill as one of your top 3 things about Cedar Falls? And then if those people were talkative, we asked one last question about the parking. And the most popular answer there was it was just too crowded. And then right behind that was they just didn't want to pay. And on all those graphs, we have them split into males and females.
Hi, I'm Carter Schlotman. Our final thoughts and takeaways after conducting this survey was that College Hill was not busy enough at the times we went, so our only option was to really survey people at Mocker Union. Females were much more talkative than the males, and college students are descriptive of the things they care about. Thank you guys for your time, and please take our thoughts and data into consideration.
Okay, thank you. I do have a question on the left-hand bar where it's 0 to 40 or 0 to 30. Is that the number of respondents who answered, or is that the percentage of respondents?
Number.
Number, okay.
Yep.
Any other questions from council? Okay, thank you very much. We'll take this under consideration.
Thank you.
Great job, guys. Any other speakers for public forum tonight? Okay, then seeing none, I'll consider the public forum closed and bring us over to staff updates. Mr. Gaines, do you have anything for us tonight?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to have Director Birdie update the council on a couple of things. The first being the fire chief process and the selection made there, or to be made there, and then also the police officer memorial that will be coming up here. So.
Okay, thank you. So, Director Birdie, the floor is yours, sir.
All right, Mayor and Council, I'm actually going to take care of the Peace Officer Memorial first, but every year Blackhawk County has a Peace Officer Memorial. This is Police Officer Memorial Week, and this year the UNI Police Department is going to host that. It's being held on Wednesday in downtown Waterloo at the Waterloo Vets Memorial Hall, and that's at 10 a.m. in the morning, so it's this Wednesday at 10 a.m., and the ceremony is usually about 30 to 45 minutes long. There have been 14 officers killed in the line of duty in Blackhawk County in the history of policing. And interestingly, one of those is from Cedar Falls Police Department. Everett Dutcher was killed in the 1940s during World War II. He was a police officer that hopped on a fire truck to help at a fire. There was an accident with a train, I think at 3rd and Iowa or 3rd and Walnuts. So that event is 10 a.m. on Wednesday morning. And then the second thing was just on an update on the fire chief process. The fire chief selection process has been going on since March. Tonight you're going to approve the hope you'll approve the civil service list of the 2 finalists. That's in the consent calendar. Those 2 finalists have all-day interviews next Monday and Tuesday, so a week from tonight. So one candidate on Monday, another candidate on Tuesday. They have 6 interviews throughout the day with various community groups, different groups from public safety. But the final part that I wanted you all to know about and for the public to know about is there's a public meet and greet from 6 to 7:30 p.m. at the Public Safety Building next Monday night, next Tuesday night. So anybody from the public, or if anybody wants to meet the fire chief candidates, there'll be one on Monday evening and one on Tuesday evening. And we expect a recommendation later next week. I'll make my recommendation to the city administrator and the mayor. And we're expecting the council to hopefully appoint a new fire chief at our very next council meeting in early June. So, and if you have any questions about that process.
Okay, thank you, Director Brady. Any questions?
Could you
Councilmember
state the
Brewer?
times again for Monday and Tuesday and the location?
For Monday and Tuesday, it's next Monday and Tuesday, 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. It's at the Public Safety Center out on South Main Street. And there'll be one candidate on Monday night and the other candidate then on Tuesday night.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Director Brady. And again, that's 10 a.m. Wednesday for the Peace Officers Memorial Ceremony. It's done every year. Beautiful service, and highly recommend public attending if you can. With that, no other updates, Mr. Gaines? Okay, so that takes us over to special order of business, where item 2 is a public hearing on proposed amendments to the city's FY 2023 budget. Is there a motion to receive and file proof of publication?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that passes. Madam Clerk, do we have any written communications filed?
I have no written communications on file, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, ma'am. And with staff comments tonight, we have Lisa Redding, our city treasurer. So the floor is yours, ma'am.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, City Council, staff, and Cedar Falls residents. The public hearing tonight is for the fiscal year 2023 budget amendments, and that is the current fiscal year that we are in, ending June 30th. Just to give you some background, the budget was approved in February of 2022, so over a year ago, and based on those budget estimates, the budget can be amended throughout the year, and this is the time of year that we usually come forward with amendments from the department divisions. As part of that amendment, it includes also some items for capital projects. Because of the timing of those, we have multi-year capital projects where we need to do budget amendments, and then we do participate in some grants for reimbursements. The budget notice includes increases to 7 of the 9 program areas, and those increases are covered by either underspent line items or some additional revenues from intergovernmental grants, miscellaneous revenues, charges for services, and other financing source revenues, as well as cash reserves. The budget amendment process is needed to be completed and submitted to the county auditor by May 31st.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Roding. Before going to council questions, I'll open it up for public comment. Does anyone wish to comment on the item? Okay, seeing none, then I'll consider the public hearing closed and move us over to Part 2E, which is the resolution approving and adopting amendments to the city's FY 2023 budget. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Been moved and seconded. Open for council questions.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilor.
Lisa, I have a question. How much money did we have left over for CIP projects at the end of this year? The money usually gets saved up and then spent all at once for a capital improvement project?
Yes, that is correct. However, we do have to finish our final financial statements and go through the audit, so we won't have any final numbers until...
just approximately, how much is it?
I wouldn't venture to guess.
So we don't know?
No, I wouldn't.
So this is kind of incomplete then?
Well, until we get our financial statements prepared and have the audit completed, we won't have that transfer resolution would be brought back to City Council, probably one of the September meetings. Would that be correct?
Correct. So keep in mind, these are the amendments to the current budget, which we do have to do under state code by May 31st. And you have to amend your budget before you overspend it. So that's what we're doing tonight. Obviously, we will finish our fiscal year. Like Lisa said, it doesn't end until June 30th. We would know what all the final numbers are from a revenue and expense side. Like like Lisa said, usually into August, because we're still having to pay bills in July and August that go back to June. And then we would know for sure how much we have left over that we'd be coming back to council with.
But we don't have an estimate right now.
No.
And then would we be able to amend the 24 budget with that money that's left over from the 23 budget?
I mean, the council, yes, we can amend our 24 budget whenever we need to amend the budget from a spending standpoint.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from council? Yes, Councilor Orndorff.
Just a real quick one. On the graph that you have, there's some items in red and some in green. Could you just explain the color coding with the red and the green? One is over expenditure, I think.
That's on the right-hand side of the chart.
Yeah.
And the black items are just underspent line items. The red items are additional revenues that we foresee getting, and the green items are cash reserves that are being used.
Okay.
Other questions, comments?
I have a question for Ms. Rodenbeck.
Yes, Councilor.
So when it comes to September and we find out that we are either have money left over or we have money we still owe, one way or another, that would not affect the tax rate. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
Other questions, comments? Councilor Cruz.
Thank you. Are all of the surpluses or whatever we net out of all of the categories, they go to CIP automatically or by city policy, or do some things go into the general fund of the different categories?
So when we finish the fiscal year, if there's certain funds, like I'll pick the sewer fund, it's restricted. Anything in sewer stays in sewer. So if there's extra money at the end of the year in sewer, it stays in sewer. There's nothing we do about that. So anything in the general fund, we come to council, and we have a transfer resolution that we have to do that is really getting your direction about what to do with the extra money. So we've sometimes done, it's for a capital project. Last year, maybe it was about our health insurance fund, but that comes to council in the form of a transfer resolution.
I guess I was zeroing in on the extra hotel motel tax, the one I'd like to pick on all the time. Just curious what we could eventually do with that. But
Point of order, Mr. Mayor, is this relevant to this item, this discussion?
Well, they are considering amendments to the budget, and I think that is relevant because it ties to what else you could be doing.
clarity, and for the public that's watching, so they know what we're doing with their money.
Okay. Any others? Then,
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
yeah.
Just for clarity, to make sure for public transparency as well, the 12.9 million is additional in budget expenditures that we did not have planned earlier in this budget. Is that the correct assessment here? That we're spending 12.9 million more than what we planned on originally?
That
Or am I
is the
misinterpreting that?
cash reserves that are being used. Those would be like previously received bond revenues, taking care of projects that would, because of the timing.
I just want to make sure for clarity standpoint, obviously that those don't mean it's extra taxes. So any budget amendments we're doing tonight is not increasing anyone's property taxes for the current year we're in or the budget we just passed for FY24. Again, sometimes why those numbers look big is really about the timing of capital projects that Lisa just talked about, or maybe we end up getting a grant or whatever, but it is tough. When a construction season doesn't follow a fiscal year, it's kind of tough sometimes to estimate when projects will happen in what fiscal year, or paving could happen in June, or it rains in June and paving doesn't happen until July, and then we crossed over a fiscal year, so. But I just want to make sure that people didn't think that it was a $12 million increase on property taxes, though.
Okay, thank you. Any final questions? Comments? Okay, so it's been moved and seconded for a resolution approving and adopting amendments to the city's FY23 budget, and this requires a roll call vote.
I don't have that on screen.
Check your tab.
I'm on all tabs here.
6 voting aye, 1 voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That does pass and takes us over to item 3, a public hearing on the proposed vacation of certain public right-of-way along Hudson Road. Is there a motion to receive and file proof of publication?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that passes. Madam Clerk, any written communications filed about this vacation?
I have no written communications on file, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, ma'am. For staff comments tonight, we have Mr. Thomas Weintraub, City Planner.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. Well, oh, there we go. Okay. Yeah, the request is for a vacation of right-of-way along Hudson Road. This right-of-way was purchased back in 1988 for the expansion of Hudson Road. It's located, you'll be familiar with the location. We've recently seen a zoning. Why does this always happen to me?
We make it like that.
It's up, okay, good, that's what we want to see. Okay, yeah, so recently the property was, adjacent to this was rezoned. The area to be vacated is approximately 1,728 square feet. This right-of-way in this area of Hudson Road is very wide. The vacated area will have a CFU water line main that they want an easement to put on it when the property is subdivided. And there'll be, the sidewalk is still several feet away from the right-of-way, so the property owner that's requesting the vacation, Mr. Nichols, will be back later with the subdivision, which we had saw that during the rezoning. And the Planning and Zoning Commission recommends approval of this item, and I'll be happy to answer any additional questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Weintraub. Does anyone from the public request to speak on the item? Seeing none, then I'll consider the public hearing closed and bring us over to 3E, which is passing an ordinance vacating certain public right-of-way along Hudson Road upon its first consideration. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Open for council questions for Mr. Weintraub, if you have them. Seeing none, then you're off the hook. So it's been moved and seconded for vacating the public right-of-way along Hudson Road on its first consideration and requires a roll call vote.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That takes us over to item 4, which is a public hearing on the proposed plan, specification, form of contract, and estimate of cost for the 2023 alley reconstruction project. Is there a motion to receive and file proof of publication?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that passes. Do we have written communications filed, Madam Clerk?
I have no written communications on file, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, ma'am. For staff comments tonight, we have Mr. Dave Wiki, City Engineer. The floor is yours, sir.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. This public hearing is for the 2023 alley reconstruction project. The project involves the reconstruction of 3 alleys, 2 of which are concrete, and one of them is going to be a permeable alley. Work includes excavation, backfill of the alley areas, removal and replacement of adjacent driveways and curb. New work would include, where required, curb and gutter, sub-drain installation, the brick pavers, the aggregate bed for the permeable alleys, and the pavers themselves, and then restoration with seeding and sod. The total estimated construction cost for this project is $256,640, and it will be funded by the stormwater funds and street construction funds.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wiki. Do we have any public comments tonight for this item? Seeing none, consider the public hearing closed on this and take us over to 4E, which is a resolution approving and adopting the plan, specifications, form of contract, and estimate of cost for the 2023 alley reconstruction project. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Council questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilor Gayfeld.
Mr. Wiki, I'd just like to double check if we could the address locations for these particular alleyways and which one is the permeable versus the concrete.
The permeable alley is the
13th, 14th, Franklin and Clay, I believe. It should say right up there on that map.
Yep, I missed that differentiation. That's all I needed. Thank you.
Mr. Wiki, could you repeat that? It's, we're at 13th and 14th on Franklin, between 13th and 14th?
Between Franklin and Clay.
Okay.
Okay, other questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilor Cyrus.
Can you tell us the cost difference between the permeable alley and the concrete? Is it concrete or is it asphalt?
They're concrete alleys.
Okay. What's the price difference between those two? Is it double, permeable double, or triple?
So I'm comparing, if I'm comparing the permeable alley to the comparable concrete alley, the permeable alley is just over double of the concrete alley. And that includes, you know, the additional work to construct that permeable alley versus a straight concrete alley. We have the subdrain to deal with and tying into the existing storm sewer, the pavers themselves. It's a little bit more labor intensive.
What about the maintenance on that over the next 50 years between the two?
So permeable alleys, they require routine maintenance to, you know, debris over time will get lodged in those brick pavers. So they have to be cleaned out every so often. So that'll just go on a maintenance schedule to restore that ability for the water to permeate into that structure, that substructure underneath.
Do we have an estimate on how much that costs to keep that clean between the bricks?
I'd have to refer to operation and maintenance. They might have some better idea on what those costs might entail.
That's fine, I was just curious, but we could do twice as many if we just use concrete as opposed to permeable. That's all. That's the question I was after. So that's good enough. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilor Schultz.
Mr. Wiki, what's the decision matrix or analysis to make a decision on if we go with permeable or if we go with concrete? Are we under obligation from DNR or EPA or some other regulatory?
There's several factors that go into that decision. One of them is if the alley is in the Dry Run Creek watershed, we can apply for grant money to put in a permeable alley in those locations. Other factors include, is it adjacent to an existing storm sewer structure that we can tie into? Other factors would include the grade, things like that. So there's several different areas that we look at when we make that determination.
So it's not just a matter of we're going to arbitrarily make this one permeable and make this one concrete?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from council?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Cruz.
Mr. Wiki, the way I understand it, the permeable alley has the collector drain underneath.
Correct.
Funnels the water to the storm drain, which if we did regular alley with concrete, that water would end up in the storm drain anyway, because we're not allowing any water to seep into the aquifer. Because that was my assumption over the years, that we want to try to introduce water back into the aquifer naturally instead of increasing the flow into the creeks and streams. Or are we filtering? I guess there's some element of filtering the water.
So on our typical like concrete alley, we don't have an adjacent storm sewer to tie into. So that collection of stormwater would just overland flow from the alley down into the street and curb and gutter, and eventually it'd make its way to an adjacent storm sewer, some sort of intake or otherwise.
So you could have some of the alley go into the backyards, as far as that goes. Or
well,
you curb them always, or not necessarily?
Not necessarily. Sometimes we'll curb them. It just depends on the existing topography and whatnot. We'll either curb them, or it could be a inverted crown on the alley. So that stormwater would collect right in the center of the alley and then go down the alley and out to the street that way.
So the intent isn't really to have the water seep into the ground? you're collecting it and,
Correct.
okay. So I guess I'm leaning towards more basic concrete if we're collecting the water one way or the other. The permeable alley might sound good, but it introduces more maintenance, and the water ends up in the storm sewer into the streams anyway. Or am I missing something?
So the permeable alley has that rock aggregate collection basin underneath of it, and it provides storage. That way, it'll provide that storage, so in a large storm event, you're not flooding people's backyards.
Slowing down the drain off. Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Comments? Okay, so it's been moved and seconded for the resolution approving the plans and adopting the plan specifications, form of contract, estimate of cost for the 2023 Sealcoat, 2023 reconstruction project, and requires a roll call vote.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That takes us out to item 5, which is a public hearing on the proposed plans, specifications, form of contract, estimate of cost for the 2023 Sealcoat project. Is there a motion to receive and file proof of publication for this?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, that passes. Madam Clerk, any written communications filed for this?
I have no written communications on file, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, ma'am. For staff comments tonight, again, we have Mr. Dave Wiki, City Engineer. So the floor is yours again.
Okay, thank you again, Mayor, Council. This public hearing is for the 2023 Sealcoat project. This project involves seal coating 5 street sections, 2 single-lane drives, 2 lift stations that we have, and then multiple single-lane drives within our cemeteries and a parking lot. The total coverage area is 43,870 square yards. What this work includes is proper preparation of the street to accept the seal coat, and the estimated construction cost for this project is $230,923, and this project is funded by local sales tax and street construction fund.
Thank you, Mr. Wiki. Any public comments for this item? Seeing none, then I'll consider the public hearing closed and move us over to Part 5E, which is the resolution approving and adopting the plans, specifications, form of contract, and estimate of cost for the 2023 Sealcoat project. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Open for council questions. Seeing none, then moved and second and requires a roll call vote.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That takes us out of the hearings and moves us over to old business, where item 6 is passing ordinance 3027, amending Chapter 26, Code of Ordinances, zoning of the Code of Ordinances relative to signage for civic institutional uses in the Downtown Character District, CDDT, upon its third and final consideration. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any council questions, discussion? Seeing none. Moved and seconded, requires a roll call vote.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That does pass then, and takes us to item 7, which is passing ordinance 3028, amending the zoning map by removing approximately 3 acres of property located west of the Hudson Road and Ashworth Drive intersection at 4919 Hudson Road from A1 agricultural and placing the same in the R1 residence district upon its third and final consideration. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any council discussion on this item? Seeing none, moved and seconded and requires a roll call vote as well.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And with that passage, that does mean the zoning map is amended. Item 8 is passing ordinance 3029, amending the zoning map by removing approximately 14.43 acres of property located north of Blackhawk Park Addition and west of Cypress Avenue from A1 Agricultural District and placing the same in the R2 Residence District upon its third and final consideration. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any council discussion or questions? Seeing none, moved and seconded and requires a roll call vote.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So that does pass as well, and its third reading now is amending the zoning map. Move over to the consent calendar. Well, these items will be acted upon by a voice vote on a single motion without separate discussion unless someone from the council or the public requests that a specific item be considered separately. Does any council member request to pull on item 9 through 16, with the exception of 11, which we've already read? Okay, seeing none. Does anyone, yes, was there, did I miss something?
Number 9.
Number 9.
Oh, sorry, I back up, no.
None, okay.
Misread.
It's okay. So with that, does anyone from the public request to pull an item for a separate discussion? Okay. So with that, and I would just ask for item 10. So, Mr. Warren, would you want to pull item 10? You just mentioned it to me earlier tonight about speaking on NF. So we'll pull that item. We're not quite ready for it yet.
Oh, okay.
I apologize.
Back it up.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was looking down. Yeah, so no other items are being pulled, which means, is there a motion to approve items 9 through 16 with the exception of 10 and 11?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that passes. And now, Mr. Warren, the floor is yours, sir, for item 10. This is approving a proclamation recognizing May 2023 as Neurofibromatosis Awareness Month and May 17th, 2023 as World Neurofibromatosis Awareness Day. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Open for council discussion. We'll go to Mr. Warren first, so yes, sir.
Thank you, Mayor Green, City Council members, citizens of Cedar Falls. In February 2019, we noticed a significant bow in our son's leg. We brought the concern to our doctor, and he recommended that we pay a visit to Iowa City. It was there where our son, at 14 months of age, was diagnosed with a genetic condition called neurofibromatosis. Hard word to say, shortened is also an NF. We had never heard of it, and when you Google it, it's kind of scary. Neurofibromatosis is a group of genetic conditions that causes tumors to grow on the ends of nerves throughout the body. 1 in 2,000 are born with NF, and it impacts millions worldwide. NF impacts all populations and leads to blindness, disfigurement, deafness, bone abnormalities, learning disabilities, disabling pain, cancer. It's different for every individual. And 50% of all cases arise in families with no history of the condition, and that was certainly our case. Since our son's diagnosis, we have connected with the Children's Tumor Foundation, a grassroots organization. Their mission is to end NF through research, awareness, and advancing care for the NF community. And research conducted by CTF is shedding new light on several forms of cancer, brain tumors, bone abnormalities, learning disabilities, and ultimately benefiting the broader community in addition to those with NF. So we greatly appreciate the City of Cedar Falls recognizing and proclaiming May as NF Awareness Month and May 17th as NF Awareness Day. And we encourage the community to wear blue and green this Wednesday to learn and share more about NF, because the more people know about it, the more likely we are to find a cure. And so for more information, ctf.org is a great resource to go to learn more. And additionally, I want to encourage the Cedar Falls community to consider participating in 2 different events that we have taking place. June 3rd, for those who love board games, my brother-in-law and I will be streaming live on twitch.tv for 12 hours straight, playing board games, raising awareness, and giving away board games. And this, to date, we've raised over $5,500 for the Children's Tumor Foundation. This is our 3rd year. 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., twitch.tv/board_at_home. The other event I just want to emphasize, Cedar Falls will host the Iowa Shine a Light NF Walk at Gateway Park this year, September 23rd. The community is invited to participate, so check-in is at 9 a.m. The walk will begin at 10. We'll have special guests, a silent auction, and more. And to sign up and donate, you can visit shinealightwalk.org/Iowa 2023. And again, that's shinealightwalk.org/Iowa 2023. So I thank you all for allowing me to share just a little bit about NF. I think that we want everybody to partake and help us end this, and may one day we do just that. Thank you.
Thanks, Warren. And could we just get your name and address for the record, please?
You betcha. TJ Warren, 4106 Sturgis Drive, Cedar Falls.
Thank you, sir. Any questions or comments from council? Seeing none, then it's moved and seconded to approve that proclamation for Neurofibromatosis Awareness Day and Awareness Month, which we've done in past years. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, that does pass. And I can sign the certificate and give it to you at the end of the night if you'd like. That takes us out. I think that was the only item in the consent calendar. So moving over to the resolution calendar, these items will be acted upon by roll call vote on a single motion without separate discussion, unless someone from the council or public requests that a specific item be considered separately. Does any council member request to pull an item from 18 to 35? Okay, seeing none. Does
20,
anyone? Oh, yes.
20, you're 23, 27, 28?
23, 27, and 28. Okay. That's from
23. Okay.
Okay. Does any councilor request to pull other items? Okay, seeing none. Does anyone from the public request to pull an item in addition to 23, 27, and 28? Seeing none, then is there a motion to approve the resolution calendar with the exception of 23, 27, and 28?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded and requires a roll call vote.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So those items pass, and that brings us back to item 23, which is a resolution approving and adopting the Housing Needs Assessment Report. Is there a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Open it up for council questions and discussion. Councilmember DeBreer, you brought this forward.
It looked like there was a lot of people from the public to speak on it, possibly.
Okay, but no questions?
Nope.
Okay. Any other questions from council to start? Okay, so if someone from the public would like to speak, you're welcome to. Name and address for the record, please, Mr. Mayor.
Good evening, City Council. Jim Brown on behalf of the Cedar Falls Economic Development Corporation. This resolution of support for the housing need assessment is just giving us the confirmation of what we already know, which is a slowdown in our housing in Cedar Falls. Presentation was given to you a couple weeks ago. The average single-family home now is $477,000. The price of housing, I should say the median price is $477,000. Prices are up 25% the last 5 years. The housing need assessment gives the city simply the options of taking a look at what's possible in all areas of housing. We're finding community-wide support and involvement in the whole entire process of the HNA. I brought along with me tonight a few letters of support that we've had from around the community. One's not a letter, it's just a brief description. We had a social event a couple months ago, and the director of the Iowa Economic Development Authority came to a social event for the CFEDC. When asked what a housing need assessment does for economic development, she assured us it's the foundation of economic development within a community. We also have a letter that came from Dr. Pattee, the Cedar Falls School District. He mentioned good housing options plays an integral part of families moving into the region and allowing the district for options and attract and retain good employees. He further says, we are excited to have the CFEDC housing assessment move forward in Cedar Falls. Another letter came from the board president of the Northeast Iowa Regional Board of Realtors, Mary Shalini. She appreciated the involvement of the community members involved. They were focused and accomplished people. The people who prepared this report were well informed of the needs for a housing assessment in Cedar Falls. This is the most complete and comprehensive report of the housing statistics or status in Cedar Falls that she had seen, and fully agrees with the report on behalf of the Northeast Iowa Board of Realtors, can attest to the accuracy of the information in this report. You might have seen a letter to the editor this Sunday from previous council member Mark Miller. He indicated in part he was elected council member of Ward 1, included North Cedar, downtown, and varied housing through the north portion of the city. Great opportunities for the need of housing in this area of the city. He urged council support on the housing need assessment. Another previous council member, Frank Dara,
His background in serving the community was Cedar Falls Park and Recreation Committee, the Planning and Zoning Commission, and of course, City Council. He does state had the many of opportunities to participate in multiple discussions in making Cedar Falls a desirable place to live. Lack of access and affordability were hallmarks of all of those discussions. The proposals offered in the housing need assessment offer real solutions for these challenges. A business owner here in Cedar Falls, they want to hire folks. It's very difficult otherwise to do so, even more so when there's difficulty with housing within the Cedar Falls. He hoped, that, along with many others too, that this would have a resolution of support. Bob Seymour mentioned a couple weeks ago, a longtime city employee, 30 years with the city, seen everything the last 30 years of what's been happening. He does state any organization desiring to expand or move to Cedar Falls desires to hire talent. These folks need a place to live. As the city grows, the housing steadies the property taxes for everybody. The first question by any developer or state incentive application is, where's your housing assessment? When one can't be produced, it drastically and negatively affects the city. We at least need to have that housing assessment approved. It's non-binding. I'd ask you all, what's the alternative? You have power to still say no or yes as different initiatives might come along that might buttress or might tag along with the housing need assessment. And just get started for all types of housing options. Potentially get state dollars that we send to Des Moines back to Cedar Falls. We're the only community around that doesn't have a housing need assessment, and look around. South Hudson, LaPorte City, Jessup Independence, Waverly, Dyke, even our friends in Waterloo. Folks, they're building houses. Please don't let us fall any further behind with our housing needs. Thank you very much.
Hey, Mr. Brown. And quick question, when was the last time that the housing needs assessment was conducted?
98.
So 25 years.
Yeah.
So basically useless to us at this point. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you again.
Any other public comments? Yes. Name and address for the record, please, sir.
Yep. Mark Kittrell, 1605 West 12th Street. I'm the current board chair of the Cedar Falls Economic Development Corporation, and I stand up in front of you to talk in obvious support of the adoption of this. And I guess I want to make sure that I use that word, the adoption of the plan is what we're really looking for. I think Jim has spoken well about the data that's in there, the important information that I think our community has come together and really created here. I don't think it's any surprise to any of us that the economy is in a tough spot right now. And I think there's a variety of reasons. You can ask probably 10 people and get 10 different reasons for it. But, you know, I think it's really important to remember at this point in time, fundamentally, a community like ours has a couple of things that we're worried about. And I know you're going through a lot of budget questions. You've had a lot of discussion on CIP projects. The question is, where do we put our finite resources? I think that really the important thing to remember is we have a choice. And, you know, we're in a period of inflation where costs are going up. Costs of construction are going up, costs of virtually everything. We have a lot of people here in the community that are on fixed income. I know it's really important for you all to keep your budget as close to what it is today. The interesting part of that I think it's important to remember is if you don't want to raise taxes on people, we've got to see the growth in the tax base that happens, because it's the growth in the tax base that will create additional revenue and will continue to allow us to have the services and the kind of community that we really all love and want to see continued. You know, I went through the 80s. I know a lot of us went through the 2000s. We went through the 2008. This is the next one of them. We've been through the flood of 2008. We've been through the flood of 2016. I love to say about this community and Iowa in general, we're not very good at change. But once we make our mind up that we want to change, I defy anybody to stand in the way of this community. We come together in those kind of times, and whether it's throwing sandbags or whether it's standing up to the farm economy or anything in between. This is another one of those times, and it's really leadership from this council on this important question that I think is really, really why we stand here today. The housing needs assessment, and I just want to come all the way back to where we started. There's communities all over the state that are asking the same questions. We've gone through a bunch of changes in property tax assessments. We're going through the rollbacks, and everybody's trying to figure out what's all this mean to the budget. Communities across the state, and I'm on the Iowa Economic Development Board, and I would tell you the mantra that we hear over and over again is it's time to grow. We need to grow. Our communities are getting older. We need the tax base. So this investment is important. We can't get people to move to our community unless they have places to live. This is the data that, based on the census, you heard the report already. We have something between 500 and 1,000 additional people or households that would like to move into our community, but it's expensive. We've got to have a public and private discussion about this, and we've got to come together and figure out how we can build more houses, because Cedar Falls is a great place to live, and people want to live here. So I encourage you to vote in support of this. We'd appreciate the adoption, and we'll have a lot more discussions on every single one of the strategies to do it from here. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kitchell. Any other speakers? Yes, Mr. Kivett first. Reverend Kivett, floor is yours, sir.
My name is Dave Kivett. I live at 1115 Oak Park Boulevard. I speak as someone who moved here 8.5 years ago. We want people to move here. And if we want people to move here, we have to think ahead. And so as a preacher, I'm going to quote a story from the Bible in the book of Genesis. Joseph had the ability to interpret dreams, and Pharaoh had a dream about the future, about 7 years of profitability and great harvest, followed by 7 years of drought. I am not asking you to develop the ability to interpret dreams, but I am asking you to approve and adopt this housing needs assessment, because it helps you make informed decisions about the future. And when we make informed decisions about the future, we'll be better able to tackle the problems of the future. And those problems are already starting to mount up as cost has increased in the Cedar Valley. And the house I live in now, nicest house I've ever owned and ever will own, I would not be able to buy it today. A lot of people are not going to be able to live here. People who teach in our schools, people who are EMTs, people who serve our community in multiple ways. So I want to encourage you to make an informed decision about our future. I also know you think a great deal about how to save money. I do too. That's why just about every Sunday afternoon, okay, every other Sunday afternoon, you can find me at a local grocery store that has fuel saver points. And if you get a pizza at this grocery store on Sunday, you get 25 cents on your fuel saver when you get that pizza. If you do not adopt this, it's like going to Hy-Vee on Sunday and getting a pizza and not using your fuel saver points. Okay? You're able to tap into things and resources that you can when you follow the adoption of this housing needs assessment. So I encourage you to adopt it. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Kivett. And I'm sure Hy-Vee appreciates the free commercial too.
Pretty good pizza.
Let's start a war here. Mr. Manning, the floor is yours, sir.
Good evening. My name is Bob Manning. I live at 2908 West 3rd Street in Cedar Falls. Proud to be a member of the Housing Needs Assessment Board. The Institute of Decision Making at UNI and Intercog that does services for many of our communities came back with just a tremendous report. Those of us that like to read reports are usually a little dorky, but I read that one and I loved every page. And there's much to be learned and much to be gathered out of that. As the executive director of the Cedar Valley Home Builders Association, we have seen many, many more houses built in Cedar Falls than are currently have been built last year and year-to-date this year. And as some of you have heard me say in the past, one of our builders has gone to Des Moines because he couldn't find enough land to build houses, even though we all know that there's a need for housing. How many of us have had a son or a daughter or a brother or sister or a family member or friend say, I can't find a house. I can't find a house that we can live in. And the one that we thought that we liked, that we wanted, was sold before we could get there. It's a serious, serious problem. Now, I have a biased look at it as the home builder exec director, but we have 65 businesses that are our members, and with their employees, they're close to 1,000 people working in the construction business, in the residential construction business in Cedar Falls. And a lot of them are local people, and we're glad that they are, and they work here, they live here, and they build houses here. But when there's no land to be found, it makes it terrible. I was down in Waukee over the weekend, the Waukee and Clive area, and I'm surprised that their lots have got so expensive that they only offer 65-foot frontage lots. And my son-in-law and daughter-in-law have a house that's on 0.15% of an acre. I have another son-in-law that always wanted to have a half acre, and but the price was out of range for him. So my conclusion is that we've all heard stories, and this assessment goes a long ways towards addressing some of the issues that we have here in Cedar Falls. And it does outline a path forward for us from this point where we're at the critical point. We're at a very critical mass point, and we need to do something quick. And we don't have all the answers, but it's going to be a collaboration of government and private individuals working together or planning together to help solve this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manning. Anyone else from the public wish to speak on the item? Okay, seeing none, then back to council for questions or comments. Yes, Councilor Whitaker.
Well, we've already received and filed this report, so really the question here is the adoption on it. And by adopting it, there's certain things in here such as creating a local housing trust fund, a landlord risk mitigation fund, major changes to our owner-occupied rehab program, or one that's kind of interesting is development of a requirement on developers to keep a certain percentage of their land for low-income or middle-income housing. But it doesn't tell you like what percentage. And I'm sure there's many other requirements that this would cause us to have to enter into. One hesitation I have is whenever we allow a large document, it really gets the ball rolling, and sometimes it's hard to put the brakes on some of the items that we aren't interested in.
Yes, Mr. Jim, please. Talk about some of the questions on that.
Sure. Good evening, Council and Mayor and residents of Cedar Falls. I'm Brian Schoen with the Intercog office. Our office was the lead on the preparation of the report, again with the backing of IDM in terms of the public input and engagement process. Back to your questions, I'll try and tick them off if I can. The decisions, not unlike the ones that got pulled after this, are ones that will come back to you on a project basis, so you will have the opportunity. The recommendations, as you read through that, lead with a word in most cases that say study, research, consider. Those are words that are leading you to further study. Again, this isn't the be-all, end-all. It's not the to-do list. It's intended to be, here's some alternatives at the very tip of the iceberg, with the idea being that what's appropriate for Cedar Falls is appropriate for Cedar Falls. We're just here to give you some ideas and some direction. And from there, then the council and the city need to decide for themselves which of these policies, which of these procedures would be most appropriate. So that was the intentional wording, so that it doesn't say you must do this, you will do that. It doesn't carry the force of ordinance. It doesn't carry the force of binding you. It is a plan. It is intended to get you thinking. It is intended to give you direction. And it is intended to give you information to help you make those decisions. Did you miss anything? Okay.
Other questions? Yes, Councilor Dunn.
Mr. Mayor. Well, first, thank you to everyone who worked to collaborate and bring this information to one document. I am not a housing expert, but I am a young enough person that's actually in the workforce. And I can tell you that I am very much aware that there is not a place to live for many of my coworkers. And I work in a, well, I still am a nurse. I work in a pretty important job. You need nurses because we are an aging population. So thank you for all the work. I don't consider this an end-all. I know that every single thing in this document that is a tool is meant to be there to help guide us, but we ultimately make the decision on every single project that comes through this community. I repeat myself a lot, I feel like, in this position. When I attended the League of Cities yearly annual event in Waterloo last year, I attended a workshop about housing, and I sat with people from all across our state, young people, old people, mayors, council people, city clerks. The common, I mean, obviously it was a housing workshop, but the common theme was there's just not enough. It doesn't matter if you're living in Cedar Falls, Iowa, or if you're living in rural, like little rural communities don't have enough housing either. And the common theme from that discussion was how beneficial a housing needs assessment plan is for the communities that had done it or the communities that were yearning to be able to do that. So thank you for doing this. I appreciate every single bit of information in here, and I hope for the good of our city in the future that we do adopt this plan so that it's there in our back pocket to refer to as we move forward.
I think Councilor Dunn. Other comments?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilor Cyrus.
A couple of things. What do you consider to be affordable housing? What's the
percent of income?
I want to know if it's 200,000 or 150 or 300.
Okay, what we're looking at is a percent of income of the individuals, and so we're focusing on 30% of your gross monthly income to afford the unit, whether that's rent or mortgage, is what we use.
No, I understand that. I'm asking you, what is this affordable price that you're talking about, and why wasn't manufactured housing ever considered? Because it said that you considered all housing. So those are just my two questions. Sure. What do you consider? I know it's a percentage because I used to figure out how much people could afford on their house or their manufactured home. So my point is, what do you consider to be affordable? Because if you're looking for low-income affordable housing, it's not going to be $477,000. That's my question, and then I'll stop.
Right. No. Back to your initial question in terms of manufactured housing, without getting into the regulatory side of things, manufactured housing typically from a zoning standpoint is considered site-built, but also has regulations in your zoning ordinance. If that is something that the community wishes to look at, certainly it's within your purview to pull the ordinance and see what it allows in terms of housing types, whether it's manufactured, site-built, but that would be something that you would want to look at through your regulations in terms of what you allowed.
But you guys never considered that. That's my point.
We didn't go down that far.
Okay, that's all. And then how much is affordable? That's what I wanted to know. You know, I don't want the percentages. I want, is it 200,000? Is it 150? Is it 300? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, we just use the percent of the income.
Mr. Mayor.
Sorry.
who was over here? Yeah, Councilor Schultz and then Councilor Dunn.
So I believe the figure that you put was the $443,000 on the median priced home. Is there a reason you use median instead of mean or average?
So backing up, I think the number that's all housing is 229, I think is the number that you'll
229?
see. The number that you're hearing, that large number that's well beyond 400,000, were the units that were built in the last couple of years. And so using median, you could use median, mean, mode, whatever one you like. Typically, from our standpoint as planners, we'll focus on the median just because it's the middle piece. It's not necessarily the average, it's the middle one in the group. So if you listed them from top to bottom, it would be just finding the middle one.
Yeah, I think my stats professor always said, you'd say to your boss, what do you want to hear? You know, so it isn't necessarily from that. I think the rent was $750. Is from Dave, Mr. Sire's standpoint, is that where we're trying to drive to? Is that $1,000 mark monthly?
Some of the, again, back to the stats that are in there, show that just a small percentage, about a quarter, are at that $750 and less in monthly rent. And that the majority of the rents were beyond $1,000. And so we didn't talk about driving rents one way or another and trying to I guess, deal with the market in that way, shape, or form. But again, it's from a statistical standpoint, you're looking at 3/4 then of the rental units are beyond that $750 a month.
3/4 of them.
Yeah.
And then just, I guess, one last, when Mr. Manning was up here, he was talking about we don't have land. What's going to get us there? As I walk around my neighborhood, there's open lots, there's empty lots, and it's more on the appetite of contractors to go after those lots in established neighborhoods, and that's what I wanted. And Mr. Miller, that wrote the article that was sat in the seat previously, great point. North Cedar, there's opportunity. In Ward 1, there's opportunity. Yep. It's not just all, okay, let's buy another chunk of land.
Right, right. We talked about annexation, of course, in the document, but we also talked a lot about infill. We talked about redevelopment and doing those kinds of things as well, because we didn't see one silver bullet, so to speak, that was going to resolve everything, but that you're going to have to look at a number of different approaches rather than just one answer, and hopefully that resolves everything. And certainly infill needs to be part of that conversation as well.
And I'll note too, the Economic Development Corporation has been very active in trying to see what those infill projects are and where those opportunities lie, and they've got some fantastic ideas. Part of that, being able to make that happen, requires grant funding. It requires support from the state, and it's going to be very difficult to get that support without the housing needs assessment to verify that that's what the needs are.
Oh yeah, I'm all for this. But these are just questions that people ask me, and this is the chance for people to hear these responses, right?
Yep, I appreciate that.
Yes, Councilor Dunn next, and then Councilor Harding.
It's just quick, and sometimes I ask questions that I think I know the answer to, but again, maybe I don't have it right. Is it fair to say that once we have more housing, possibly even housing, like different types of housing, that just having a greater variety and, I guess, source for people to pick from naturally will maybe drive the cost of housing down, or at least maybe stabilize it? Am I wrong in thinking that? Like, when you don't have enough housing, it makes, this house that maybe sold for this a little bit ago, it's the only house in town for sale, and somebody really wants to live here, then that naturally probably drives the price up. Am I wrong in thinking that?
If you offer different densities, if you offer different types, and with the idea being that the price tag or the market is right for that unit, then it stands that that price would go down if you're doing something that's much more affordable. If you're using a smaller lot, if you don't need utilities brought in, if you don't need some of those things that cost a lot of money, then it stands to reason that that would be the case. Again, we've seen some very expensive, whether it's high rise or some of those other counts, but certainly the option of having alternatives is one then that hopefully will affect some of those choices that people can make, and will also then serve them so that, we don't all necessarily like to have the same house. And so just the choice, just the difference, whether it's price range, style, density, all those kinds of
Right. And then I think like maybe, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but if someone's living, say, in my neighborhood, which I consider somewhat modest neighborhood, but they want to maybe move to a different kind of house, and maybe that house is even more, more expensive than what they're currently living in. But then when they move, that frees up their house that's maybe a little more affordable. Is that like a good assumption?
Yeah, we talked about that as well too. The trickle up and the trickle down in terms of moving. You've got to have a place for people if they're going to step up or if they're going to take a different route. If they've decided, I don't like to mow the yard, I don't want to scoop the snow anymore, I want to get into an HOA and do a condominium thing or a garden home. But just having those options so that people can move to that option then would free up the unit that, say, for instance, I'm in.
Right. And then another, maybe this is an assumption, but I don't think it is. When we talk about like, we have these open lots, maybe in my neighborhood or different parts of our town that would be considered infill. But I think part of the reasons why this assessment was important is builders want to know what they should build, right? They don't want to build something that's not going to sell. I mean, that's one of the reasons you do a housing needs assessment. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Councilor Harney.
All right, I'll make it short-ish. I'm kind of good at that sometimes. Other times, not so good. I will say that I'll use a personal example, and then I'll say that I think this is fairly simple for me. It's a document that says a lot of recommend, study, look into. Everything will come back to us. It is fact that we have a housing shortage. Affordable housing is a sliding scale. I will use a personal example. My mother retired. She moved out here. She just got a house. She cannot live in Cedar Falls. She had to move to Waterloo. I still love her. It's okay. I say that because she had a specific goal. She is on a fixed income. She is retired. She had to buy a house for $140,000 or less. Has anybody in this room tried to find a house for $140,000 in Cedar Falls lately? Because I spent 6 months doing just that. They don't exist, people. And when they do exist, they are snatched up instantly. And generally, the two we looked at went to 160 real fast. Overpriced. They do not exist. So we moved to Waterloo real quick. We looked for a long time. And that's okay. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with that. In Waterloo, we had a much easier time finding a house, and she has a great place, and I love that she's there. My point is that we need this. There is not affordable housing in here. It's different for every person. It goes off of whether you're on a fixed income, whether you make $66,000 a year, whether you make $150,000 a year. Furthermore, again, I'll come full circle. It's a recommending document. Don't read too much into it. It will come back. You can say no. It says full of study, recommend. For the good of the people in Cedar Falls and the band director that just got hired at Cedar Heights, who I talked to at the convention last week. So excited to teach in Cedar Falls. I don't have a place to live and I can't find a place to live. Can you help me? She can't find a place to live. She's going to be traveling to work here. People can't find places to live. By not adopting an option for that and supporting that's a tough one. So I would highly recommend that we adopt and look at some options on this thing. It's out there. It's happening.
All right, thank you, Councilor Harney. Questions, comments?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Cruz.
Thank you. Couple things that stuck out at me. One in particular, as a business analyst, I look at all the numbers really quick, and that's just my thing. But the stakeholder input, we had a survey of the residents, apparently for, I think it was just everybody, not just low-income housing or affordable housing. Right. There was only 144 respondents with a population of 40,000. that's statistically not relevant, I guess, if I drill down into it. You can't gather a lot of actionable information off of that. You can get some, but as you go down through here, it says that 2/3 of the respondents believe it's somewhat hard or very hard to find affordable housing, with Simon's comments. Friends of mine have had to bid $30,000-$40,000 over list price to get a property, put in escalation clauses and all sorts of creative things to get their properties. So one of the other items I saw in here that really stuck out at me to answer to Simon's comment and others why we have a lack of affordable housing, 85% of the homes, the housing stock in Cedar Falls was built since 1970, compared to 70% in Iowa. So we have newer houses that are worth more with more modern building codes, what have you. So you can't build a $140,000 home. The lot will cost that. So, you know, when I hear people say we got to adopt this, that sounds like I have to accept all of these recommendations or strategies here, 33 strategies. I'm very skeptical. We receive and file it, which I thought that's the vote here, but that apparently was done at the committee meeting. I'd say we got to do receive and file now first. But if we adopt or approve, that puts in motion 33 items here that we have to dissect and see if the data inputs are even accurate, is what I'm concerned about. So I'm very skeptical. I know we need to look at some of this stuff. I'm very interested in looking at revising the rental codes, because I think there's some major flaws in that with you know, options like ADUs. I think that's phenomenal. I love them. Carrying capacity of lots needs to be dramatically changed and addressed. I could go on and on. So all that data is not in here, but we're approving it. I'm skeptical. I mean, it doesn't say in here that if we receive and file this, that this is going to go in a wastebasket. It's here. So why wouldn't the community use it? Then going forward, we pick out things to approve item by item or work on. Am I missing something in the process?
No, actually, each of the projects are going to come back to you. Your comments in terms of the items that you would like to look at can absolutely be part of the conversation. In terms of ordinances, we were more general than that. We said, look at the ordinances, whether it be building code, mechanical, plumbing, electrical, zoning, look at those things. And if you want to retain them, you want to add to them, then that's fine. But go through them, do a little bit of self-examination, and go through those things.
Oh, I've examined a lot, believe me. Having been a landlord for 41 years, I know the housing market, and particularly the college student market. And I have concerns here, and I've had concerns for many years before I even came on council, things like the carrying capacity of a lot and telling students they can't live 4 in a 3-bedroom house or 5 in a 4-bedroom house, or 5 or 6 or 7-bedroom houses can't have every room used, particularly when they're next to campus and they behave themselves. We got good code enforcement sitting over there that takes care of what's going on, and bad behavior is not tolerated. So I got to call out something here I read. The very first regulatory review item says the success of the form-based zoning requirements in downtown character district. That's kind of a subjective statement. From some viewpoints, there's been projects that did not succeed and didn't move forward that should have and could have if we used the traditional zoning and brought in components of form-based zoning.
I'd want to be careful about how far we deviate from the topic at hand.
It says right here, success of form-based. I'm reading right out of the thing here. So I don't want to acknowledge that that form-based zoning downtown is a true success. Different viewpoints from different people. So I could go on and on about a lot of things in here that I'm skeptical to say adopt, because that puts in motion, that gives direction to staff to work on 33 projects, and they're going to come at us like weekly or bi-weekly.
Thank you. Other comments?
Mr. Mayor.
I'd like to
Yes,
hear
Councilor
Brian's
Canfield.
remark to that, Mr. Mayor.
That'd be fine.
I don't know that you'll necessarily have 33 coming at you at once. Certainly, we want you to look at all of them. Some of them are not going to be relevant. Some of them you're going to want to adjust. Some of them you're going to want to add to. Some of them you politically may not support. And so we're just saying these are some of the things we want you to look at, give them a chance, do the homework, and then talk about them. And so at a council level, at a staff level, again, the decisions will land back here.
So what's going to happen then, staff is going to grab 2 or 3 of these and bring forward a committee discussion, and they're going to say, we would like you to approve this. We weren't involved in the background information that I pointed out here, only 144 respondents out of 40,000. That's not relevant to really have a good data to work with necessarily.
Let's, from the standpoint of the 144, that was just the survey. So add on top of that the steering committee, the task force, the 5 focus groups, and the meetings then with CFEDC, the TV show that was on Channel 15, the reflection meeting that was had after the last council meeting, had about 24 at that meeting, was about what we had. And so if you add all those pieces on there, we've done what we could do. Getting people to answer surveys is always a challenge. And so we got what we got. When we did the 5-year housing plan for your CDBG or Community Development Block Grant, by way of comparison, we got 160 responses. And we sat down then with various agencies that serve the community. But beyond that, they didn't have the outreach at that level.
Councilmember Harding.
All right, let's take the people out of it. Just use the actual data. Use how much a house costs. Use how many houses we have available. Use the MLS listings that we actually have access to. We're in the double digits for houses, as sometimes as low as 19 listed in a city of 40,000 where there are 500 to 1,000 people looking to move here. Simple economics dictates that supply and demand, that we will not have affordable housing with those ratios. So you can just forget the people. I mean, that's good that we did that, and we have all these X, Y, and Z. The data's there. The data's in there. What it comes down to is a simple fact that some people on council, which is okay, philosophical difference, don't like the adoption process, and that's fine. That's all it goes to. I would say that if we choose not to adopt it, we can use it. I support adoption because I do want staff to look at these data points. As far as if we don't adopt it, well, we didn't adopt the resilience plan, which is fine, but so far we haven't talked about any of them, and we're not going to because we're busy. We have a ton of stuff to talk about. We have we have to approve and do tons of work to help run the city. We adopt things so that we can tell staff to look at stuff and do the work and bring it back, and we can make the decision. So smile if you want. It's cool. I know. I've only been here 3 years, and I'm not.
No,
I'm
I'm
always
sorry.
professional.
Sorry.
I mean, you've been here a lot longer, and I get it. But we have to delegate some work to staff and then let them bring it back and us decide. We either are elected officials that approve the decisions of our trusted staff, or we get a job here, and then we work. And again, I might fall on the other side of the philosophical, political wheel on this, but the fact of the matter is that the data is there. Supply and demand. It's simple economics. We have more people wanting to move here than we have houses available. This is a starting point. That's what it is. I'm ready to call the question.
Mr. Mayor, just one last thing, I guess, for me, and then I'm with you, and Dustin as well. I can't stop thinking about Hy-Vee pizza, but I'm going to get over that here eventually. But we got Intercog, we've got Cedar Falls Economic Development, we've got Dr. Petit, we've got the Northeast Iowa Board of Realtors, we've got former council people. We have community input on this to adopt it. I'm with what Simon is saying. This is, and to what Mr. Brown said. We're leaving money on the table with the state that we're sending down there and we're not bringing back. It should be reason enough to adopt this.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Final comment.
I'd like to have an opportunity. I sat on the task force. I appreciate everybody on the task force. I had a good learning opportunity there as well. I want to work well with the folks that were on the task force. We're all Cedar Fallsians, if that's what we officially call ourselves. We want to continue to work together well. I'm kind of torn on this issue. I can see a little bit of both sides, and I hesitate to even acknowledge that I'm using Simon's words of yesteryear when talking about zoning issues. But I look through the line items in this, and Brian, you're right. It's all consider, explore, by and large. Consider, explore, research. There are a few items that say take this action or that action. Some of them give me pause, most of them I'm for. There are some pieces in here that say things like consider incentivizing universal design, and I'm thinking back to myself, what happened to the rhetoric of let the market dictate what the developer's going to do? We used that exact same jargon to force in the zoning code updates downtown. So I've got some pieces in here that I have concerns about, even having sat on the task force. I've got an article in the paper. I'm not trying to get overly political, but this body doesn't seem to work well together on certain things. I'm looking at the regulatory review. I'm just going to quote right from it. Review the city zoning ordinance, subdivision ordinances, building codes, etc. In so doing, build upon the success of the form-based code. I'm not saying that that's the prescription or that's the only way to go, but it feels a little heavy-handed. When you look at the responsible entities for that zoning code update, I think it's rather telling that the city council isn't listed amongst those entities. It's city staff, planning and zoning, housing commission, the EDC, and developers. If we're the law of the land, then we have to approve that law.
Yep.
And when we talk about approving or adopting this plan and 33 bullet points become the acting instruction, I look across the gallery and I see a whole bunch of head nods saying, no, that's not the case. But that's absolutely the case. We're saying we approve these actions. So again, I'm kind of torn on this because I want us to work well. I think no matter how we shake this down, it's going to come to a 4-3 vote. And do we want to continue to keep forcing things down everybody's throat with a 4-3 vote? Because that's how we get disenfranchised people. I would be much more akin to saying, let's postpone this and refer this topic to a work session so that we can, instead of tabling it indefinitely by a no vote or making sure that we have to adopt all or nothing, take it to a work session so that council can hash out what they don't like. Figure out how we can get a workable document. Because I agree the data is clear. We have a need here that needs to be addressed. But the way we've gone about it, where we have people saying, hey, we have a divided council and we have issues with our elected folks, inflection mine, that we really feel like are impeding our ability to come to consensus on where we want to go as an organization, and we think that's an issue that we'll be highlighting throughout the election. No disrespect or offense intended to the mouthpiece, but that's not cool. That's not how we get together as Cedar Falls. This is clearly going to be a 4-3 vote. I'd like to vote in favor of it. I just think that there's some pieces in there that can't get everybody on board. So with that said, I guess I'd make a motion to postpone this and refer it to a work session of council.
I'd second that for discussion.
Motion and seconded for discussion.
Is that even an option, Mr. Rogers?
Council can refer the matter to committee,
Sure.
sure, or a work session, either way.
I would be curious, Mr. Schoen, what's the huge detriment in a 2-week delay potential if we did push this to a work session to make sure we come up with a 7-0 vote?
The pressing matter right now is the 27 and the 28 on your agenda, which are due in June. The issue ultimately becomes, does that afford them enough time to say that there's an adopted housing needs assessment in their application? That's the press right now.
For further clarity, then, it must be adopted for the IDEA to contribute funds. It cannot be just received and filed. Is that correct?
Right. As was presented, I think, last month when you went through the program, they would like an adopted attached as a requirement going in with the application.
Okay.
Now, I would just like to add in, I don't speak too often on these kinds of matters, but conversation has a cost. By talking about this, certainly you're bringing forward potential opportunities, potential changes, but keep in mind that just the door that has been opened by saying council may not support this, it may get voted down, causes developers pause. And I'm sure Mr. Manning can back me up on this. People leave the city for development not because of the votes, but because of the tone. And I would tell you that already council has damaged our developmental future with this discussion. I'm seeing head nods from people who know. So I would ask council to vote down this motion and vote on the item and vote for approval of it. Councilor Harding.
I guess I would just say, I can understand where you're coming from. One, to work session and go through. There are things in there that I definitely, I wouldn't support for our community. But I would adopt it just because when that came forward, I'd say, no, I don't want to do that. So, and again, I think it truly goes to philosophical view of how you want to do this. Do you want to sit there and figure it out? I'm just less of the, I don't want to say the word micromanage because it does have like a negative connotation sometimes, but do I want to hash through this whole document and try to get it as perfect for Cedar Falls as possible? No, people have already done that. I want them to bring it forward, and then let's see as a group what works. It's more efficient. At least it's been more efficient in my experience to do it that way. So I can see where you're going and coming from, but based off this motion, I would support just adopting it and then voting things down that I don't like. That's just my philosophical, political preference.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilor Campbell.
I guess I'd like to reiterate here, I'm not talking about dismissing this entirely. I would rather have a group consensus, and I am not a developer, but I speculate that a developer that sees this pass with a 4-3 might be a little more hesitant than a developer that says, okay, cool, it's a 7-0, because you don't want to start a plan in an election year that could fall through with the change of council. I'm tired of things going through 4-3 and having people ticked off to the point of going to the polls. I'd like to see this come to a group consensus so that we know where the heck we're going as a city.
Mr. Mayor, I would say a 4-3 vote is a consensus, because do you know what you would call a doctor that gets the lowest score in med school? A doctor, right? So what do you call a vote that's 4-3? You get the passage. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you. Any others
Mayor,
for this motion?
Brian yielded some time to me, and I just want to
I'll take your word for it.
Offer a thought on a point of order that it seems to me that this council turned down doing its own housing needs assessment about 2 years ago. And so the Cedar Falls Economic Development Corp was started because of that, so that we could present a housing needs assessment to you tonight, or eventually. It took a long time, and it took a lot of money. The city didn't want to spend the money, and I can accept that. So the individuals on the board popped up for $10,000 apiece to be the seed money for this. So it doesn't incorporate everything, but if you really want to have more respondents than the 144 plus, then perhaps the city would want to do their own housing needs analysis. But I'm guessing that's not the case, that you don't want to duplicate things. So it's not meant to be a perfect document. It's to point out some ways of the future. And I would hope that you would all be favorable to this, and then you can discuss at your goal settings or work sessions or whatever's appropriate to see which ones you want to move forward with, or perhaps none of them. But I think this is the first step, and when people talk about how the council is perceived, it has seemed very divisive this past year or two. And I'd like to think that we'll get past that on more things, including this, but other things also, and present more of a positive light for Cedar Falls. And I would challenge you to do that tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Manning.
Mr. Mayor.
Any other, well, I call that public comment. Any other public comment for the the motion? Yes. Name and address for the record, please.
Hi there. Carrie Dara, Grow Cedar Valley, and I think it goes without saying that we support this housing needs assessment. We are one of very few communities in the state, if not the region, that does not have a housing needs assessment. And I will tell you that when we have prospects that come to the area, we represent Cedar Falls, Waterloo, Waverly, the entire region. One of the handful of questions that they ask is about your talent and your workforce, transportation, housing, and your housing needs assessment, very specifically that document. And so I would tell you that's my opinion professionally, and I would tell you that you are leaving money on the table for our developers who can take advantage of these resources if this is approved. This council is not against not passing something that they don't believe in and they don't feel strongly about. So don't think that you can't vote against something in this recommendation, this plan, that you're not in favor of. But passing the plan, having a plan, is so important. And I will tell you the most damaging thing to prospects and developers and anyone that wants to grow a business in this community is uncertainty. And that's exactly what not passing this is going to provide for them. Uncertainty does not do anybody any good. You will have every opportunity to vote down any piece of this recommendation, this plan. This is not a requirement, and you've been told that many times. There is nothing in this document that's a requirement. This is all a recommendation and a plan that gives you some guidance. And communities that don't have a plan, that don't have guidance, are not growing. So again, this comes as no surprise from the Grow Cedar Valley. I wasn't planning on speaking, but I think it's really important that you know from our organization and from a regional aspect that this is critically important to pass. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Anyone else from the public wish to speak before going back to council? This is on the, could you repeat the motion on the floor?
This is on the postponement.
The motion is to postpone voting on it.
And to send
it to a work session.
Work session, okay.
Technically, a motion to refer.
Yeah, motion to refer to work session, okay. Any other comments from public on it? Okay. Back to council for the motion on the floor, which is postponement.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilor Cruz.
So with Councilor Ganfield's idea, are you wishing to have 33 items discussed in a work session? Or are we, in my mind, I can approve the data all day long after Brian explained that it wasn't just 144 people. But it's the strategies that I have a concern with, because when we approve and adopt, we're saying 33 strategies are running out the gate like the Kentucky Derby.
That's not true.
Well, that's what I perceive and I feel, because we were told that the downtown visioning would be easy to change and adapt, and it was never the case. And the minority is controlling changes in that with supermajority requirements or your veto. So again, I like the data. The data is great. To me, that is the study. We studied the data. Now, what do we do for strategies going forward is a separate component. And Brian, if you can explain why it's not, or Mr. Brown or anybody else can explain, the strategies are separate from the data. We approved the data.
Yes, Mr. Schoen, if you can enlighten us on this one.
We don't usually, from a planner's perspective, we usually don't break them apart between data and strategies. They're usually part of the same plan. So if there's one thing that's not agreeable, then there may be changes that are made to that then to make it agreeable. But for the most part, we don't separate the data. The data is intended to support then those recommendations, and we don't typically then break them apart.
So then do we break down and have committee meetings on 33 topics? Or grab 2 at a time? Or, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in here that the public doesn't even know, understand. And with my analytical hat, I can read it pretty quick, and I've related to it over the decades, but it's not an easy thing to comprehend for.
Yeah. We have gone, if you want to review them, if you want to look at them, obviously, that was also why we were here, a couple weeks ago, so that you would spend the time doing it. And if you had questions, then the idea being of the reflection meeting was you'd have an opportunity. I know it's not a council meeting, and I know some of you came individually to that work session or that reflection meeting. So again, if you want to look through them, then you could do that now, or you could, as was stated before, look at them as they come up.
Well, for an example, one easy to think about is the ADUs, accessory dwelling units. In the cities that I've been in throughout the United States, ADUs are in both owner-occupied and rental. ADU is a rental, the front house is a rental, if you call it the front house.
Sure.
Here they're saying, oh, we can't have a rental ADU, ADU on a rental property. I think that's a major discussion we're missing out on, particularly when it comes to students near the campus. You know, you could drill down on that. And we approve this, they're going to come forward, the staff will come forward with ADU proposal for just owner-occupied properties. Then we got to arm wrestle and argue and debate and slice and dice it and, you know, refer it and so on.
So how do we get to a point of order here and do the vote?
You could say,
Point of order,
I call the question.
I call a question. Let's get going.
I called the question.
We want to push, I want to push it through, but I also want the process that the people understand.
Let's not have a side discussion. You
I
no
have
longer
the floor,
have the floor.
Mr. Mayor.
The question was called.
I'd like to hear what he has to say.
We have to vote on the call to question.
Calling the question. When a member desires to cease debate and to vote on the pending question, the member shall request the floor and state, I move to call the previous question. If seconded, the motion the council shall then vote without debate on whether to call the question.
So there's no I didn't hear a second on calling the question.
It's been
There's a
seconded.
second.
Call the question. Okay, so with that, we'll vote without debate on whether to call the question. It needs a 2/3 majority. So is there a motion to call the question? Or is there all in favor of calling the question, say aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, aye. Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. Nay? 1, 2, 3. So it's not a 2/3 majority, so we continue. Yes.
Now we go forward with the motion to table to a meeting.
That's where we're at.
Well, I'd like to hear what I was speaking of here before I get interrupted.
Continue.
Well, the question on ADUs. Staff is going to come forward with ADUs for owner-occupied property only. And any landlords that have had rental property would understand if you have a big lot or a garage, you can put an ADU in the back and have another rental unit there that would be conducive to offering affordable housing that we desperately need in town. I can show you statistics from the parcel reports on the city. We have approximately 1,000 bedrooms.
Mr. Mayor.
Units over 4 people, 4 bedrooms that are not being utilized. That information is not in the study. There's countless things that I could come forward with that aren't addressed.
Which we could do on every single point for hours on end, but that's the point of this, to move this on, to have those individual discussions. And I've been doing rental property for 33 years, Daryl, and you know that too.
Oh, we're not supposed to have a side comment.
Okay.
Okay,
Then you and I, we won't talk anymore on side comments. Nonetheless, I thought the whole deal was to keep us moving
Are
forward.
you recognized? Councilor Schultz. Go ahead. Okay. Councilor Harding.
Okay. The zoning stuff passed. Whether it was forced through or not, doesn't matter. It was voted on by council. You have to vote on it. It passed. Yes, we've been having referrals, and it's been tough, and we've done this, and we've worked back and forth with all this stuff. But there are a handful of things in there that I realize you're not happy about. I wasn't happy about the PSO program when it came in. But that doesn't mean I hamstring the future of Cedar Falls and say that staff's going to do this or do that. It just, and I could be wrong, but my perception is that you are saying these things because you're convinced that staff is going to do this or staff is going to do that based off of perception of something that happened in the past. And it comes across to me as we're not truly thinking about the residents and about a starting point and a plan for housing. We can talk about the adoption process and all this stuff. If you have a rental thing with ADUs, I want to hear it. Refer it. Let's legitimately talk about it. I'm definitely open to it. I don't think that's a bad idea, but we can't hamper the progress of Cedar Falls and do an injustice to the citizens who can't find housing by sitting here up here and not just saying, all right, let's pass this, let's look at it, and if what comes forward you don't like it, then vote no, and I respect that. I mean, that's how it goes. And you know, I mean, it just, again, I'm not trying to just single you out. It's just based off of what we're going back and forth with here. I feel your frustration, but let's move forward. Let's continue to move. We've had the votes. Let's go. I'm not referring the PSO thing constantly every week and doing that. Let's move forward. Walk one. Let's go. So, and if you want to vote it down, I respect that, and we voted it down. But let's just go.
Let's call the question then and go with the vote that's on the table.
I did. Well, the question got called and it failed. So,
well, that's where we're at here. It's been moved and seconded to postpone or to refer to a work session. This discussion. Any final comments on referring to work session? Okay, then all in favor to refer this to work session, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay. Nay.
Okay, so let's see a show of hands for aye. 1, 2, 3. And for nay, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that fails and brings us back to the original question. What's on the floor is the resolution approving and adopting the Housing Needs Assessment Report. Open for continued discussion. Anything else? Okay, moved and seconded and requires a roll call vote.
Four voting aye, 3 voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So that does pass and takes us over to item 27. Thank you, Mr. Shin. And I would just like to say, I didn't get a chance at the end, thank you so much for the work that was put into this project. Thank you to the EDC for your support in building it as well. And I look forward to seeing us move forward on the recommendations and to discuss those further in the weeks ahead.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Item 27 is a resolution supporting a workforce housing tax credit program application to be submitted to the Iowa Economic Development Authority by BJW Holdings LLC for workforce housing tax credits for the proposed Cottage Courts project at 215 West 9th Street. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Councilor DeBreer, you had brought this forward as well.
Yeah, I had 2 questions. The first question I have, it says that the eligible project must be on a brownfield or grayfield, or the repair or rehab of a dilapidated housing unit or an upper story housing development. My first question is, which one of those items is this? Brownfield, grayfield, rehabilitated, dilapidated housing unit or an upper story housing development?
Yeah, this is Brian Winger, 2110 Glen Drive, Cedar Falls. This would be on a grayfield site. The site was contaminated with over $100,000 of asbestos abatement costs. The whole entire church was just riddled from windows, glazing to some different particles full of asbestos within that, and it was professionally remediated by Advanced Environmental in late fall of 2022. So this is considered a contaminated site by the state of Iowa and qualifies as a grayfield site.
Okay. And then the second question, maybe Karen would have to answer, but this is in the new downtown character district neighborhood small frontage. And previously, I think it was an R2 area. So my question is, what's the difference in the size of the lot requirements between the R2 and the neighborhood small frontage?
I'd probably refer that to Karen.
Yeah, I thought you might want to.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
It says this is in the new downtown character district called neighborhood small frontage. Previously, I believe it was an R2 area. I wanted to know what the difference is in the lot size requirement between the new small frontage, neighborhood small frontage, versus what the prior was with the R2.
I'm not certain this was in an R2 because most of the areas in the downtown character district were either R3, R4, or commercial districts previously. So I believe it was probably either, I feel like I can't speak off the top of my head as to what it was previously. It's helpful to have those questions ahead of time if we could have researched that and brought it to you.
Well, most of the houses around there are single-family homes around it, which have probably 125-foot square footage. What is the square footage on these? It just says 7,000 or 700 square foot building. What's the lot
There's
size?
a footprint of 700, a maximum of 700 square feet, but I think the square footage has a loft and a basement as well, so.
So what's the lot size, again? The lot size per unit?
There is not a lot, there's not a specific lot size for this particular, it just has to meet the parameters of the zoning.
So you're using it, kind of comparing it to an R4 district then?
Yes.
Okay. That's the answer I was trying to get to.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm not sure it's apples to apples, so that's why it's difficult to answer that question.
Okay.
Any other questions from council? Any comments from the public? Yes, Mr. Brown?
Jim Brown, on behalf of the CFEDC. You folks right now are considering the workforce tax credits. And I personally just went to the website, and it's a real application. And again, there's opportunities where our tax dollars have been sent to Des Moines, and this opportunity here is for those dollars to come back as it relates to development, how it relates to you folks, our decision makers, helping your citizens. A couple of weeks ago, it was stated by 3 council people, no public funds for private gains. That has happened in Cedar Falls for 30 plus years. The industrial park, north and south, our downtown, various incentives given throughout our community. It's a good soundbite, but that's the public-private partnership at a whole different level when you're talking about public dollars helping the private side. Item number 7 with the application, it says, does this project include matching funds equal to at least $1,000 per unit? Folks, the way you look at this is that this is revenue generating. How many $1,000s would you folks give in order to receive tens of thousands of dollars in perpetuity? This helps prime the pump. So after the next 20, 30, 50 years, you've recouped that far more than the original $1,000 per unit. You folks, through the previous process for the budgeting, it was all about expenses, and a few comments about how do we increase the revenue. And as you folks know, expenses come quickly. The state gave us some extra expenses. The county gave you folks extra expenses that you had to work through. But revenue happens day in, month out, every single year. Projects like this generate the revenue it takes for the long-term type of planning that we need. And the best solution to move towards revenue is growth. Projects like this one. The 10th item is the resolution of support for the housing project by the community where the housing project will be located. For communities, I don't know any, according to Brian Schoen, but who don't have an HNA, which we do now, the resolution of support, projects like this not getting approved is obvious and maybe even subtle difficulties. So another page I'm just showing here was we fall into a category called the urban definition. There's 11 of the most populated counties. It's Black Hawk, Dallas, Dubuque, Lynn County, Jones County, Polk County, Pottawatomie, Scott, Story, Warren, Woodbury. We're competing. We're competing with these folks. It was mentioned, or it's not necessarily mentioned a while back, but I know it's been mentioned in the past, how do we measure opportunities lost? In other words, how do we measure folks who didn't develop in Cedar Falls? Mr. Mayor, I spoke to Darrell High of Cedar Rapids for high development, gave me permission to utilize his name. I called him. He simply said, I have 4 applications elsewhere for housing tax credits. Why should I build in Cedar Falls? Based on the conversation a few weeks ago, a couple meetings ago, the comments made by some of the council. He pulled his application. So we have projects where folks are ready to take risks, spend their capital, Let's help them, and let's help Cedar Falls. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. Other comments from the public? And then back to the council.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilor Cyrus.
As much as I like the specific developer, I want to see public funds stay with the public taxpayer. And that's one thing I take very seriously is our tax dollars. I do hope he gets his money for the abatement on that asbestos, and there should be some different ways to do that. And I want to have him to have great success on that. But it's always been my theory that if something's worth building, you don't need the public's money to do it. That's all.
Comments from council? Councilor Harding?
Mr. Rogers, if it doesn't pass, can I give him 12,000? And that's sorry, bad joke.
And I'm not going to respond.
I figured. I guess that's my point, is that $12,000 invested by the city, the math comes back 24,000. It was around roughly 24,000 a year in revenue, which we were just talking about. So we spend a little to make a lot over the next 50 years. If we do, 10 years at 24,000, we're at it doesn't take long to get to $1 million generated. So on a $12,000 investment, that's the kind of investments that business people look for daily. And things are changing. Private-public partnerships are happening for us to grow. I'm willing to invest a little bit on the front end to see that kind of return, especially because we do not have to pay out a single dime until the project is, and correct me if I'm wrong, 100% completed. Correct?
What we have in the staff memo is that our match could be done if the council wants, as occupancy per unit occurs. So that wouldn't quite be 100%, but 100% of one unit, pay 1,000, 100% of the second, pay another 1,000, for example.
So even better. So, okay. So I guess I just don't see a problem. I look at the numbers and I see it as a win for Cedar Falls in general, especially to generate more revenue for us and take the burden off of the taxpayer as we grow as a city.
Other comments? Let's give a final comment on this then. I appreciate what I think is Mayor Brown had said earlier about priming the public dollars to help bring economic vitality to the city. This is one of those no-brainer items to me. And it frustrates me that we seem to be apoplectic about trying to approve them. The $12,000 that is going to be invested this year through this project, once the project is completed and we provide that money, we are not even going to think about in 20 years when we're drawing revenue from what currently is an empty field, which has been a church which had no tax liability to the city at all. This is easy. Please approve it. It's been motioned and seconded and requires a roll call vote.
Five voting aye, 2 voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That takes us to 28, which is a similar item. This is a resolution of support for a workforce housing tax credit application to be submitted to the Iowa Economic Development Authority by CV Commercial LLC for workforce housing tax credits for the proposed College Hill mixed-use project at 2119 College Street. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Councilmember DeBeer, you brought this forward.
I'm assuming that they're calling it eligible project because of upper story housing, is that correct? It's not a brownfield, not a gray field, it's not dilapidated housing unit?
Mr. Graham, our Economic Development Coordinator.
I believe it's going to qualify under the gray field.
Because it's contaminated also, or?
Brownfield is contamination. Grayfield talks about like underutilized infrastructure, outdated infrastructure, things like that. That's the definition of a gray field.
Okay.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Any from the public? Okay, so back to council. It's been moved and seconded and requires a roll call vote.
5 voting aye, 2 voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And so that does pass as well, and takes us out of the resolution calendar and over into bills and claims. Is there a motion to approve bills and claims
So
for May 15th?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Then been moved and seconded and requires a roll call vote.
I gotta get there.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Any council updates or announcements tonight?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilmember Cruz.
I got several, actually. One of the older ones, we had a referral to discuss vinyl siding and the prohibition of vinyl siding in neighborhood medium, neighborhood small. I think it's close to a year ago now. We've had countless other referrals that come in after that. Wondering where we're at to bring that forward and discuss.
Yeah, as we talked with the council about the multiple referrals we had on the downtown code, we were taking those one by one, and so we made it through a couple that had been postponed because of voting threshold discussion. The Planning and Zoning Commission has discussed the vinyl siding, and a recommendation will be in front of the council soon.
Okay. Next one, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, please.
Mr. Rogers, I think about 2 months ago, maybe 3, I had made a referral to discuss the 20-year limit on boards and commissions that the mayor had put in place. And you were going to do some research on something to do so, I believe. And then actually, as time went on, the mayor then revoked his own 20-year limit and put in somebody with 20 years.
No, that's not true. I didn't revoke it.
Well, you disregarded it, your own policy. But Mr. Rogers, can you explain what you're looking for and waiting for the referral to come forward?
I don't recall specifically. It must have been a while ago. And perhaps I thought the mayor's action mooted the point, but it probably has to do with age discrimination concerns. But I'm going to make a note of it, and I'll reach out to you in the next couple of days and let you know where I'm at.
Okay. So the referral's still active?
As far as I know, and to be honest with you, I'm not sure who has the ball on that, but I've got it now.
Okay, thank you. Next one, Mr. Mayor.
Please.
I think when we had the low MOME discussion, I made a referral to eliminate the prairie grass plantings in the right-of-way, and I think that was a 6-to-1 approval. That's about a month ago now. As grass is growing and going to need to be mowed, we should address that issue to eliminate the right-of-way. And where are we at with that referral?
We have several other referrals from goal setting that we're working on right now to try to bring forward to the council so that we can honor those requests. And so we're looking at the mowing one probably in September. It's very hard to change regulations in the middle of this season.
Okay.
Any other updates or announcements?
Mr. Mayor,
Cruz.
as I asked Chief Birdie last council meeting, what were we doing to alleviate the crime? I had some questions on the statistics. Are we boosting anything on College Hill area or anything like that? Are we getting our dogs? What's happening on all those things? Or is it just business as usual? That's just my curiosity.
Well, the question you asked was about some crimes that were in the monthly report.
Mm-hmm.
I responded to that question with an answer to the whole council. So we have downtown. So basically, looking at those crimes you asked about, there was nothing out of the ordinary. But we have additional patrols that we've been doing in the downtown College Hill. We have specific things we do when there's an active investigation. So absolutely, we are doing things.
Okay, thank you.
But if you have a more specific question.
I just wondered if we were being a little more active since it seemed to be quite a few assaults and that kind of thing.
Well, it seemed to be, but as I broke down that email, you can see a lot of them were just harassments. It all had to do with how you code the cases. You know, for example, the report showed 2 kidnappings. We did not have 2 kidnappings. We investigated 2 kidnappings, though, so there's a difference.
What about a home invasion? Did we have any of those?
What month are you asking about?
Well, it had been last month.
There has been one, and that was very public. It was in the media. We did have a home invasion, but that wasn't listed on the report that you asked about.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilor Cruz.
I've had just recently a concern brought to my attention about the intersection at First Street and Union, which I know is DOT jurisdiction and maybe shared with the city. Numerous people have asked me about the possibility of getting a traffic light there, and whichever one of our directors could address that. I had a lot of people during campaign season and since then asked me, because it's a open intersection, so what could we do, or how do we address that with partial DOT supervision?
So actually, I received an email from the DOT district today again. They had a citizen from the community reach out to them. They provided them with a response today on the study that they did a year ago. They did a traffic signal analysis, which did not meet any warrant. There are multiple warrants that need to be met to install a signal, and I can provide that to the council.
That'd be awesome.
Tomorrow.
Thank you.
Any other council updates or announcements? Okay, then going to council referrals. Seeing none? Then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.